Hi, my name's Nate Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of GLCS, and this is the Driving Forward podcast. Like and follow GLCS on LinkedIn, and continue to follow us on Thursdays at 1:00. Today we have Kevin Coomes on our show. I've met Kevin some time ago. But we started talking a lot more here in the last few months. And Kevin is the CRO with Greenscreens.ai. So happy to talk to Kevin about a variety of subjects in the industry. But before we get into that, just wanted to touch base on a few things that we have going on coming up here soon with GLCS. In the month of December, GLCS is participating in Wreaths Across America. So December 16th, we will be placing wreaths at the Fort Snelling Cemetery in Minneapolis, St. Paul. If you are interested in supporting Wreaths Across America, wreathsacrossamerica.org is the website. You can donate there. They are looking for additional personnel to assist with wreath placement. And if you are in the Minneapolis area and do not want to sign up directly, please feel free to reach out to drivingforward@glcs.net, and we'd be happy to have you join us on December 16th for the wreath placement. Following that, we're taking January off, and we don't have any events going on there. We're not taking January off, but we don't have any large events going on in January. But GLCS will be attending Manifest February 5th through 7th. That's in Las Vegas this year. So once again, follow GLCS on LinkedIn. We'll be posting all kinds of content throughout the conference, similar to what we did at F3, at Trimble Insight, and at a variety of other conferences that we've gone to. So we'll be putting up to date. We'll actually be doubling down on that this year as well, providing quite a bit of content at each event that we attend. So once again, Manifest February 5th through 7th. Following that, we will be at the Mid-America Truck Show. That, I believe, is March 21st through 23rd in Louisville, Kentucky. We're happy to join there. That's a very large event, and we'll be primarily walking that event and meeting lots of people. But lots of events this year now that I'm looking at it. But immediately following the Mid-America Truck Show, we do have a booth and sponsorship with the Truckload Carrier Association, the TCA, in Nashville from March 23rd to 26th. So we do have a booth there and are a member of the TCA. So we'll be happy to see everyone there. So we'll be picking everything up from Mid-America Truck Show and shuffling over to Nashville, Tennessee. And then don't forget about the Broker Carrier Summit in April 22nd in Kansas City. That's April 22nd through 24th in Kansas City. We'll have a large amount of people in Kansas City. Kevin and I will be talking about the Broker Carrier Summit here shortly. But it's an event that you really don't want to miss. This will be marking basically the first year of the event. This is the third Broker Carrier Summit. The last one had 227 attendees, and we're really targeting 1,000 attendees this time around. So lots of activity around it. We're talking to everyone. There's a lot of great energy surrounding the event, but this is largely targeting relationships between brokers and carriers and creating good relationships moving forward to kind of further the industry. So with that all being said, I'd love to bring forward Kevin Coomes, the Chief Relationship Officer with Greenscreens.ai.
back to your first time sitting behind that wheel, way up high looking.
So that is a song from Eric Daly. It's called Big Truck Life. So
Love it.
He is a trucking company owner, I believe, in the Tennessee or Georgia area. But it's a great song. If you haven't heard the whole song, you should check it out. So we're actually talking to him about potentially attending the Broker Carrier Summit.
Nice. Love it. That was awesome.
Kevin, welcome. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, man. Happy to be here. I'm happy to talk Broker Carrier and Manifest. We'll be at both of them, right? So good shows.
Well, we have a tendency of kind of following each other. So
we do. That's funny, actually. Yeah, I just had that conversation with somebody else the other day. There's a few of us that were literally at the same places for months on end. So,
if there's non-asset, you guys are there. If there's asset, it's funny because there's different crews, and we're starting to do more on the non-asset side. So you guys are always around when the non-asset side is around, and we have similar relationships on the asset side of the industry as well. So it's fun. So and we get along great with you. I'm actually very interested on the Broker Carrier Summit, and because we're going to have a large amount of people there, and to kind of combine the two. I don't know how many people you guys are bringing, but you brought an army to Tampa, so it'll be great to have a larger number of GLCS people. If you guys bring the same amount, that'll be kind of interesting.
Yeah, we definitely will. It's crazy because like this year there were so many conferences back to back, like you said, and now next year too. There's just so many of them.
Yeah, doesn't go down in number. There seems to be more. So
yeah, it just keeps going up.
So Kevin, a lot of this podcast is oriented around learning about people and who they are beyond just what's going on in the current events today. Certainly, we're going to talk about current events later, but we really, want to hear more about, where you come from, how you got into the industry, sort of who Kevin Coomes is. So with that being said, can you give us your background, where you come from, kind of the origin story of Kevin Coomes?
Sure. I like a good book and a warm fire and a walk on the beach. I'll give you a little background on myself and kind of how I got into the industry and kind of how that's culminated in Greenscreens and everything that's been going on the last couple of years. So I actually got my career start in China years ago. When I first graduated from college, I moved to China for a year. I actually speak Mandarin. I took Chinese in college, so I took 3.5 years of it at Kansas State and got my minor in it. And so I packed up and moved over there for a year after college and kept learning Chinese and all that. And then really the logistics thing started the second time I lived in China. So I actually lived there in 2007, 2008, went back in 2011 and 2012, and actually had a company there for a couple of years, and actually worked for a couple different companies. One was my own company, and then I worked for a large bus manufacturer that was an Australian company. And it's kind of how I got into the supply chain stuff, just learning the ropes in China and really the ocean, the air side, but the supply chain side in general. From the shipper side of the business. We actually had a Chinese partner that did a lot of commodity trading too. So imports, exports, steel, timber, things like that. So when I got back from China, I actually started working for a company here in Kansas City called, it was Catapult International. They were launching a separate company called Express Rate that they were trying to do like an online marketplace for forwarders back in 2013. And quickly then moved to Chicago and started working for Carrier Direct, which is Metaphora, which is another mutual friend of ours, friends of ours.
Those guys, well,
Yep, Peter and Ryan and all those guys. Peter actually started working there at the same time I did, about 1.5 years after I did. So I was there pretty early on with Carrier Direct, doing consulting work with brokers and 3PLs. We worked with some of the tech companies as well. Left there for a couple years, 1.5 years or so, and went to work in day-to-day freight. So actually cut my teeth on running a brokerage team and managed the sales, and had a team of 7 brokers doing everything. We did ocean air, we did LTL, truckload, everything. So did that for a couple of years for a small brokerage forwarder down in Florida called X-Freight. And then I jumped in the tech side with Revenova about 7 years ago now, almost. Wow, time flies.
Yeah, I believe Revenova's been around that long now, actually. So time flies. So
crazy. Yeah, I got there pretty early. I got there. They launched it, I think, in 16, and I got there in 17.
yeah.
And so we only had 6 people at the time, 7 people maybe. There's actually a funny story about that. So the first day that I walked into Revenova's office on my first day of work, they had an office downtown, and then like a month after I was there, they moved out to the suburbs. So I worked primarily remote. But Andrew Silver was in the office with Matt Vogrich and Will Jenkins, and they were just starting Molo. They were actually they were implementing Revenova. It was different.
This world is so small.
I know. Yeah, that was my first day in Revenova. I didn't know Andrew or any of those guys at the time. Got to know them a little bit, not really well, but just really funny that they were in there. There's, they had 5 guys, and they were starting Molo, and they were getting on Revenova. So yeah, I did that for 4.5 years, and then joined Greenscreens about 2 years ago, and took over all the sales and the commercial efforts here. So
awesome. So a couple questions on the background. Why Mandarin?
That's a good question, because I'm a crazy person. So I actually did. So in college, I did political science and international relations, and ended up in freight, as we all do, right?
None of us planned it.
Yeah, exactly. We just trip and fall and end up here. So that's actually what I thought I was going to do was more government work, State Department, or maybe like FBI, CIA, something like that. That's actually what I was really interested in. My dad is actually a retired FBI agent, so that's kind of what my interest was. And I was going to take a language for that purpose. And I was actually between Arabic and Chinese, funny enough.
Okay.
And I told my parents that, and they're like, "You're crazy. Why would you take Arabic?" And my dad especially was like, "You're going to end up in the Middle East. You don't need to do that."
Yeah.
And this was, 2003, 2004. So a different time also in the Middle East.
Right.
Though much hasn't changed. We can talk about that later.
Right. That's another podcast.
It's another podcast. So I ended up landing on Chinese, and then ended up getting my minor in it. And looking back, it was a good choice because I didn't end up in the government or any of that. I ended up doing business, and it ended up kind of helping my career along. So.
Oh, that's interesting. So, and then did you just kind of fall into the move to China, or how did that?
Yeah, that's another good question. So I graduated in May of 2007 from school, and I was actually applying to get my master's in something with like international relations and international security and stuff. And I just immediately, like one day, like had this epiphany where I was like, I don't want to be in school anymore, and I don't want to be in Manhattan, Kansas anymore at Kansas State. And so I hadn't really looked for jobs or like really done much to that point in terms of like internships or jobs or anything. So I went to my Chinese teacher, and I was like, "Hey, what do you think?" Like just different people, different teachers and stuff that I was talking to finishing my senior year. And she was like, "Hey, she's like, you like Chinese, you're really good at it. You could go live in China." She's like, "You can teach English. And they'll pay for your flight, they'll pay for your room and board, everything. And they'll keep giving you Chinese classes. A lot of them will do it." So she's like, "You could do that." So I graduated in May of 2007, and I moved there in August of 2007. So.
And so that's interesting. Do you still use Mandarin frequently then? Or has it?
I mean, it's funny. Like I can still speak it pretty fluently because I lived there 3 years in total, right? I lived there a year the first time, 07, 08, and then I lived there the second time with my own company that I had in 11 and 12. And so I got pretty fluent in it living over there, so I can still speak it pretty well. I always tell people it's like your vocabulary is what goes, though, right? It's
Right.
like if you don't, it's like leaving a job with jargon or something, right? And you
Sure.
don't use that jargon anymore. Like you leave the freight industry for 20 years. It's like you come back, like you still get it, but some of that
Yeah.
jargon might be lost on you. So I
You'll
don't
lose the
use it as much as
swagger.
I should.
Yeah, you lose
Yeah.
the swagger. Yeah, the reason why I ask all of that is, it's something that comes up commonly when in conversations with you or around you, and I just had, the further detail around it, I think was what I was hunting for. So is, how did this overarching Kevin Coomes in China happen? So,
Yeah, it's
I appreciate
funny to
that
think.
detail.
Yeah, it's funny to think about too, because like if we're at like conferences, like when we were at Broker Carrier talking about it, or people bring it up, it's now since I don't use it as much like day to day work or anything like that, which I did for years, right? I used it in my work and different things. It's funny because people are like, yeah, Kevin speaks Chinese, like, and you're like, wait, what? Like, it's not like a cheap bar trick. Like,
Right, right.
like,
That's like,
it's a language that I speak.
I do card
So,
tricks.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
no,
funny.
that's interesting. Well, that's uh, great. I mean, I appreciate you sharing all that with me. That's something I've been curious about. So obviously, I had the opportunity to pin you down, and you couldn't run away or get called off by 45 other people to talk. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So time at Revanova, so they've obviously become kind of a powerhouse on the non-asset side. 4 years with Revanova, right? That's what you about
4.5.
that.
Yeah. Almost 5. Yeah. 4.5.
So,
Maybe.
so really kind of rode the wave of that. And if I recall, there was, a few different solutions that were coming up in logistics on the Salesforce platform at that time, but Revanova is really the only one that has stuck. And stuck quite successfully. We have a lot of customers that are on Revanova at GLCS. And so that kind of launched into then green screens, right? That was the move into green screens. So 2 years at green screens, that's been a ride. I know, we started talking some time ago, and I've been aware of green screens for some time. But tell me about what's going on at green screens.
Yeah, the ride has been crazy these last 2 years. Actually, it's like surreal, the growth that we've had and kind of what's happened. So the company itself, I don't know if Don's told you the story about the background or anything, but we actually launched out of a digital freight brokerage. That's how the company originally came about. So there was a company in Chicago called Cargo, Carggo. They were, they launched in like 17 or 16, and they were trying to do the digital freight brokerage thing, right? The Convoy Uber type model. And they were building a lot of their own technology. And they built their own pricing tool and capacity tool and some other things. And they were not as heavily funded as Uber and Convoy. I'll just say that to compete at that level. Yeah, right. And so Ben Gordon, who's the chairman of our board, if you know Ben from Cambridge Capital, he got introduced to the owner of that company and started talking to them and said, hey, basically, I'm not interested in the digital freight thing, but I am interested in the technology. And so they brought in Dawn as a consultant originally, our CEO, Dawn Salvucci Favier, and she was a co-founder at 3G TMS, has a long history in TMS, about 30 years, and on the product side. And so they started looking at the technology and they landed on the pricing technology. So that's how Greenscreens actually started. They looked at the pricing technology. They said, hey, if we can take this and we can adapt this into something we can sell to other brokers and 3PLs, right? To empower them to predict rates and quote faster and automate rating and things like that, and give them their own pricing engine. That's something we could have something there. And so that's kind of how it started, was that way. And then I joined the team about 2 years ago. So we launched the product in April of 21, and then I joined in November of 21. So we had a couple of customers at the time. I think we had like 7 or 8 customers, maybe. We had a couple of pilot customers. NFI was one of the pilot customers that helped us build out the concept of the technology to make it more, flexible to use with different brokers. And then, so joined to take over the sales efforts in November of 21. And we've gone from 8 customers to, we just signed our 146th customer today.
Awesome.
And so, all in just over 2 years. My 2-year anniversary was like 3 weeks ago. So
congratulations to that. So both the 2 years and the 146th customer. So
it's been crazy. It's been fast. So
that's awesome. Well, you definitely have impacted the industry. I'd say obviously have impacted the industry. We had a shakeup this year. I wouldn't say a shakeup, but a change in the Freight Waves top one or Freight Tech top 100. You guys came in at top 5, but certainly the top 25 were a different set of companies than we usually see. I know I practically leaped out of my chair when you guys got 5.
Appreciate that. I think we did too.
Yeah. Right. So no BS, just GS. So, but what did you feel about that top 25 and kind of the different actors, different companies that we saw this year comparative to previous years where, we're kind of seeing the same companies over and over for many years. And now for the most part, everybody's new.
It was interesting this year. We did not know we were going to end up there. I'll just say that. People always talk about these things and these awards and stuff and how they're, pay to play or, something like that. And we definitely didn't do that. I can probably see that. We have a great relationship with Freight Waves. I'm not saying anything about that. But it wasn't something we bought. I'll tell you that much. We had no idea we were going to end up at number 5 on that list. It was interesting. Yeah. I mean, this year was really interesting with a lot of the new entrants and the new players that were on. Highway was on the list as well, right? It's a good partner of ours. It's funny too. It's we looked at the people and the types of, markets that they service and the type of products, that were on there. And I think it's just changing nature of the time. Post-COVID and the supply chain difficulties and the volatilities in the market, I think you're seeing, just a shift in the sentiment of what people are looking for in the industry, right? And so, we were excited. And I was going to try to pull up the list if I could. I was going to try to figure it out.
Yeah, I have them. It's not something that I have that can be shared right at the moment.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I think because ahead of us, I think it was interesting. The 4 people ahead of us were huge companies. Amazon was on there. Best Pass was on there. People that have a lot of these people have had a lot of investment, right? Yeah, and not to say that we haven't taken any money, but it's just a very, very different. And we also service brokers and 3PLs solely, and most of these people service shippers that were ahead of us too. So it was interesting.
Had kind of a bigger footprint than what necessarily. I mean, if you look at your market, you have somewhat of a limited market at the moment. I think that there's potentially a breakthrough for you guys coming, but
there may or may not be new things coming.
Fair enough. So fair enough. Yeah. I keep saying the same thing about GLCS too. We have a huge potential, but you got to actually do it. And sometimes doing is harder than you think. But
we definitely have some things on the horizon for sure.
Sure. But I mean, Blue Yonder was on there. I mean, I would have never guessed to see Blue Yonder on there. Although they have some great things that they're doing. That was a shocker. So So
Workite's on there. You've got some of the other Bitfreighter made it on the top 25, which is awesome. Happy for Brad and all of the stuff he's done. I talked to you. I was just on Weather Truck with Dooner last Friday, and he asked me the same thing about the Freight Tech 25 and being on there, and I was like, it's honestly like a lot of getting on that list and doing that this year. So we weren't on it before, was just our customers, and
Sure.
the feedback that we've gotten from the service that we provided in terms of, and I don't mean that in like, hey, we're great. It's just more like the differentiation, the uniqueness of what we've provided to the brokers and 3PLs in the changing landscape of freight, right? There's just so much more. There's so much more being demanded of them now in terms of speed and also accuracy, right? You really have to be clued in on the market changes and what's going on. And again, like I said before, I think some of that's the volatility after COVID and what happened to supply chains and stuff. People are being way more, shippers are being way more scrutinizing of the rates that they're getting and the carriers that are being used and the different things that are going on. So I think that was a huge part of it, was just listening to our customers and adapting to the market as it's changed. And we've had good success with that from a transparency standpoint and delivering the data and the accuracy and the results to customers in that way. So,
no, I can completely see that. I think speed and consistency, repetitive consistency and response time is much more important now across all platforms, whether you're broker, carrier, shipper. Everyone needs immediate answers, and they need it to be accurate. There's no. You just look at any sort of data transaction today. Getting it just briefly outside of rates, any sort of data transaction today, and the demand that's being asked is so much more than what it was 10 years ago. It's so much faster, so much more accurate. The requirements are so much deeper. Sometimes they're even, you really ask why do you need this? But on the rate side, certainly that's not a debatable thing. You're talking money. So, but
yeah, you made a good point there too. The data in general, I think what we've realized with, especially with all the AI stuff that's going on right now, right? We've realized that one of the key advantages of having automation or automated data transfer or, key integration to improve accuracy of data transactions, both on a pricing side, but also BOLs, right? Or, shipment information around the pickup times, delivery times, carrier information. You look at all the fraud that's happened in the market. If you're integrated and automated and you're transacting data without being manually input, that solves a lot of those problems because you don't have human error that can be introduced into the process when it's done that way. And I think that's also what's changing. And that's some of this stuff with the Freight Tech 25 is I think some of the players in that space that were on that list are kind of keying into that concept, like integrating direct data transfer, automation, accuracy in data so that the transaction is just smoother at that point.
Yeah, seamless, smoother. They're pulling it into, when possible, pulling it into the TMS or whatever solutions that they're working with, when possible at least. You see a lot more of that now. They get frustrated when they can't, when they're working with legacy products that can't bend that way. And there's a lot of that today in modern solutions. So I see that as well. Yeah, speaking about AI, I recall a conversation where I think you and I had at the Broker Carrier Summit when potentially that might have been when we first met. We may have met before then, I don't remember. But the first conversation of any depth that we had, we were talking about AI and data mining and data cleansing, I think is, you had a particular term that you were using, and I don't remember what term that was.
Data cleansing or filtering. We use filtration a lot. Yeah.
So that's how you had thought, I think at that time, or maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but one of your points to AI was just its ability to clean up the massive amounts of junk that we have from data, from a data perspective. So the way you had kind of eloquently said it. So that's somewhat resonated with me over the past few months. As I've watched and I don't like using AI as a term, just like everyone else in freight tech or logistics tech tries to avoid it. But all of us secretly are out here hunting for the real AI solution. We just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, every one of us we all perk up when somebody says AI, but we all don't want to talk about it. So, but yeah, from a cleansing perspective, I think we're seeking that out too. We move ridiculous amounts of data ourselves and have issues with the cleanliness of it. Having, if you look at how much driver data we move, it's almost insane. So,
yeah, I think the key there, first of all, I don't think I've ever been accused of eloquence, so I appreciate that.
Well, this was before the summit actually really started.
I just spit it out usually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the key with AI that people miss on a lot is that it's a process of the data cleansing component of it is the most important part in terms of getting a clean model, so that when you train an algorithm, because there's really two parts to that, right? It's the model that you build, that you feed the data into, that then trains the AI, and then the AI is making inferences from it, right? It's learning from that, and then it's adjusting algorithms to make a prediction or to give you an answer or whatever it is, right? And so it's just like anything, right? It's garbage in, garbage out. If you feed bad data with bad variables or not enough variables, right, that it can make a clean inference, then you're not going to get accurate results. Right. And so I think the key to that people, I think, misunderstand in terms of, like, if you look at ChatGPT or the fear around some of the stuff that's happening with AI, right, is that it's inevitable in that human beings, the world has moved too fast, right? We just talked about it with just the freight industry in general, but it's just the world around us is moving too fast. Answers are expected too quickly. Information is expected to be at your fingertips right away. And human beings don't have the capacity to take massive amounts of data and multitask and crunch it all down and do it. You think about research in science, right? And how many years it takes for people to figure things out with new drugs or cures for diseases, because they have to go through all of these cases. They have to go through all of these situations and all these trials and tests and things to go through and figure out what the solution is. Whereas, like, a computer can do that all at the same time.
Right.
It can do it all at once in a multifaceted, multi-threaded environment where it can take massive amounts of data. It can analyze all of it, and then it can model it and then break it down and then train itself. Human beings we just can't do it. And so I think if we're expecting the trend to continue both in freight, but also in the world of instant information and good information, clean information, right? Not Twitter or X, but good, clean information and results. Like, AI is inevitable in that way, because the computer just has the capabilities that we don't have to transact that data and clean it and model it. So
I think that's the difference, is the transaction versus non-transactional data. So, well, I mean, even non-transactional data can still be mined for transaction. So but transaction, I mean, when you're dealing with large quantities of transactions that are forms and formulated data, that's where cleaning that up, it becomes easier. When you're dealing with unstructured data, I guess is the proper term, that's where, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But certainly structured data is a lot easier to clean up. So potentially, or at least
we like structured data. We don't always get it at Greenscreens. But we like it more than
Yeah,
unstructured
no,
data.
I get that.
Yeah, you guys know that, right? With GLCS, with working through
We
consulting
know that
projects and
very
everything.
well. So if
Yeah,
every one of the solution providers in the world would decide that they're going to work on some sort of generic format, the world would be a lot easier. But no
it'll
one
never happen.
talks the same language. Yeah, everybody's got to be different, and
Yeah,
nobody can talk the same language. So we have to figure out how to make Klingons and Romulans talk. So
exactly. Yeah. Well, it's a fair point though, specifically like in our industry in freight, right? Like you have how many different TMS providers with different data models, plus the shipper TMSs, plus other transaction systems, bid boards, or whatever else, and like there isn't going to be a single standard for that. I brought this up the other day. I think you actually saw this on LinkedIn when we were talking about the rate thing with the TQL thing, right? And I'm like, it's different because the stock market does have that. It has a structured data format and it's regulated, and the SEC mandates the way that the records are kept and the data that's transacted and how it's done. It has to be because you're playing with everybody's money. You're playing with world global economy. Like it has to be. But it's also in like an infinite number of transactions that can be presented, right? There's a million stocks. I always bring this up. Like if I don't want to buy Tesla today, I can go buy Amazon or something else, right? I don't have to go buy Tesla stock. That's not the only thing I can do to make money. In trucking, it's limited capacity. I don't have a choice. I can't go to, if I don't have a truck in Chicago, I can't go to New York to get a truck. Like that just doesn't work. I have to move freight out of Chicago. And so I think that's where it's different for us too, with the unstructured data and what have you. Is there's no way to you can't regulate that, and nor should we. Like it's goes against everything in a free market. It would be so troublesome for everyone in the supply chain.
Debatably, I mean, coming from the carrier side, I can rate however I want. I just might not get the load. I mean, you can, and I have rated that way in the past, and I did get freight. You can rate deadhead in and get rate out of market. And then when you're dealing with larger quantities and you're a larger fleet, you can flex and say, let's say I'm moving 25 to 50 loads a day out of a market, and I have a shipper that needs that volume commitment on a daily basis. So just to say, I have Chicago, a shipper out of Chicago that needs to move 25 loads a day to Denver. I have 25 trucks a day in Indianapolis, and I'm going to rate it. I'm just going to give them the rate. They have a choice on whether or not they want to take that or not. They can say no, but that's, I think, the point that you're making is, and you said this, someone else said it later in that stream or that conversation is, I know I said it twice, that carriers need to understand their costs and put that out there. And if they choose to take a load or if they don't choose to take a load is on them, not on someone else. So if you're going to run empty, you throw that rate out there. If the broker takes that load, or if the shipper chooses to take that, if the broker takes the truck, or if the shipper takes the truck and you've wrapped in your costs, then that should work for you. If it doesn't work for you, then that's your error, not the
What
broker's.
are you doing? Yeah. The idea is to make money, right?
So looking at your data specifically, I get your point on, we have particular markets that we're working in, but you're looking specifically at transactional spot market items.
Specifically,
is what I think the core of that discussion specifically was. That and that's a great segue kind of into, we wanted to talk a little bit about rate transparency in this 49 CFR 371.3. So I've memorized that one. I said it like 40 times over because it's coming up so
that's
often.
Pretty good.
Yeah. But that's the bill or the bill that basically requires brokers to show or state the amount billed to the customer, to their customer, and the amount paid to a carrier. So, and that's already in place and has been for some time. I think since the mid 90s or early 90s. It's been amended a few times. It's fairly open, and it's not well defined as timelines that are out there. I've called out there being a couple issues with it, both on the carrier side and on the broker side. My broker hat on, I say this is a horrible scenario to have. It basically opens you up for back solicitation. It gives you, your carriers now have your gross rate to your customers. But in reality, if I really wanted to, I could create two brokerages and broker a load to myself, or, even though that's technically double brokering. But if you co-broker a load, who's the actual customer?
You can co-broker loads, yeah.
Yes, you can. So, you could create some sort of ghost broker scenario with a co-brokering separate company and start hiding your gross rate. I mean, this is going to create if you go down some road, it's going to create some solution that's going to get bunky. And it's going to be to protect the broker from a back solicitation scenario. And it's also, Grace Sharkey mentioned yesterday, it's going to, also be something to reduce administration cost on the broker from having to research all this data that's going to be asked for by carriers. And so on the carrier side, in my opinion, most of them don't care. The smaller fleets, smaller independents, 5-10 truck fleets they may care, but those that understand their costs are likely going to be not too worried about this. So there's all kinds of open-ended items with it that I don't think we know. I mean, you look at an individual transaction on this and say, a broker made 60% margin. Well, do they have people on site? Are they managing transportation on site? Is there, some sort of cost that's unknown to other people on this? Is there a scenario where they need to get that type of margin because of a cost that's associated to them that isn't necessarily transactional on the order? Those are stories that we don't necessarily have. Is it seasonal? And 9 months out of the year, they make a 5% margin, those type of things. So I just monologued. So
you're good. I think you brought something interesting though. And we talked about this at Broker Carrier a little bit, right? We had a couple of these in the discussions on the panels and stuff. And I think this will definitely be a good topic to discuss in April in Kansas City, my hometown.
Yeah.
But the transparency piece, it's interesting because it doesn't, and this is something we discussed at Broker Carrier in Tampa, it doesn't behoove a broker to screw on their carriers either, right? I mean, you need good carriers that can handle the load, that are going to do it effectively and happily and safely to keep your customer happy and on time. And vice versa, right? The carrier with certain brokers, if they're working with the right people, right? There's bad actors in any industry and bad apples, but if you're working with the right people, you go back to that broker because you can get more loads. And so you do want to have a good relationship, a strong relationship with them, right? Now, in the case of like somebody like a TQL and they're so large and what have you, yeah, there's going to be bad apples inside their own organization, right? I mean, that's just going to happen. They have 1,000+ employees. But at the end of the day, like you said something interesting, like the 60% or the hidden costs or whatever, right? And if you're one carrier, you need to move 3 loads and you're like, oh, you got a 50% rip on me on a margin. Yeah, but there might be 20 other loads, right, that they didn't, and there's reasons for that. It's one load for one shipper in this situation, right? And it doesn't affect, at the end of the day, I mean, it like you said, the carrier took the load for that price. So it has no bearing on what I could buy something from you and then go sell it, for $500, go sell it for $1,000, and you're none the wiser. And you feel good about the $500 you made because you bought it for $250. Who cares, right? Like it doesn't. That's not really a like you said, you have to understand your own costs and run your own business at the end of the day. But I think the key though is and especially what Dan is trying to do with the Broker Carrier Summit is like building those relationships, so it's not just these transactional relationships, so that there is incentive to give a fair rate to the carrier, to give a fair service to the broker, so that there's reciprocal business there too. I think it's, I don't know. I think you could split hairs all day over the 60% load or whatever,
Right.
but there's thousands and thousands, and we transact through Greenscreens with our 100 and something customers on a daily basis. We have like 40 to 50,000 loads hit the AI a day. But that's like it's so you can split hairs all day, but there's a lot of freight, and we're not even. I mean, we're just scratching the surface, right? As we grow, so yeah, I think it's the nitpicking can get a little crazy at times.
Agreed. When you really come down to it, to reiterate some of what you just said, it comes down to relationships. I've said this countless times, and I try not to echo the same statement over and over. I did have lunch with one of my mentors in the industry yesterday, and he's now in his early to mid 70s and retired. But he was around prior to deregulation, and he called out that carriers have kind of gotten lazy over time. They, especially the smaller ones, they've stopped selling. They've stopped worrying about the relationships. And I think over the last 10 years, brokers have, to some extent, stopped worrying about the carrier development. Not all of them, but some of them. And that's where, the Broker Carrier Summit comes in, as, bridging that relationship barrier, creating that safe space to where I recall creating that safe space where you can talk out some of these items so everyone can see it from multiple angles without having to worry about getting angry on a phone because you need to move a load or you have 10 different things going on in the office. But to come out of that with a strategy of, I need to shore up the way I operate. So on a carrier standpoint, they cannot, and I've said this for many, many years, and I've run a lot of trucks throughout my career, but you cannot run the kingdom come. You cannot just take loads anywhere. It does not work in markets like right now. And if you just scatter it out over time in a great market, in a solid carrier spot market, and a carrier forward spot market, they're going to make good money. They're going to do really well. But when times get tight, they're going to get destroyed. And you got to take that time to develop lane saturation, develop that lane with a broker. If you're a 5-10 truck fleet, develop that lane with a broker, or try to build your own shippers in that lane if you can. If you can't, then build out a small set of brokers that you work with. If you can't go back and forth making money, build some triangles that are all kind of operating in the same fashion. But look at it as a head haul, back haul, head haul scenario. So you're at least getting 2 strong rates and only 1 weak rate in that sort of strategy. And you're not just going head haul, back haul, head haul, back haul. If you're not hauling customer direct freight, you're going to take some fluctuation, when the spot market weakens, but you're not going to get hit as hard if you have those relationships with the brokers established. That's where I think that through the Broker Carrier Summit, both the brokers will benefit, because at the carrier side, when the carriers are dominating the spot market, they're going to move freight that they normally wouldn't move faster. and at a slightly better margin. They're not going to get gouged as hard because, the relationships over time. And everybody needs to figure that one out, because it seems like we can't, as an industry, work together, and everybody seems to forget every 2 years, or every year or two, although this particular cycle seems to be running a little longer than usual, but we seem to forget that. So anything else on the rate transparency or anything that
I guess we could leave it with, I mean, it's one of the things that, obviously with Greenscreens, right, what we're trying to do is help brokers and 3PLs specifically get to the right rate, right? And it's not always about like the market rate. And this is something you kind of just mentioned, right? There's not a rate. You move scrap metal, you move TVs for Samsung, and you move, pharmaceuticals. Those are 3 different trucks, 3 different carriers, 2 different requirements from the same place to the same place. You're probably going to have different rates. And so I think that's the other thing that is important. And we talked about this panel that I did at Broker Carrier. Both the carriers and the brokers need to have a better understanding of market dynamics in general, right? And the changing market dynamics, so that they know what those rates should be, right? And have a better idea of where they need to price their truck so that they can make money, aligning with their costs, as you mentioned. And so I think that's another thing as an industry we just need to get better at, is adopting better technology, better resources to be able to, and demand it. I think that's the other thing too, right? We've just stuck with this same idea for years that this is the rate in the market or something like that. We need to demand better technology and transparency into what that is. And it's coming. I mean, there's a lot of people that are working on this problem on multiple levels. We are, but others as well. But I think that's it too, right? Is like you gotta take the onus on yourself to understand the market and what those rates are as well.
No, I agree. Determining where the rates are coming from, not only on the carrier side, but on the broker side, understanding the carrier side should be driven by a little bit of market impact, but also cost and where they need to be. Ultimately they should be cost plus, and the plus being market impact, and that can be substantial dependent upon the scenario. Now, as far as Greenscreens goes, just so I can kind of table that, the rates that you guys put out, how are you gathering those rates? How are they being predicted?
Yeah. So essentially, as I said, we work only with brokers and 3PLs today.
Yep.
We're working on some other products for other parts of the industry, and we'll be changing, adapting some of the technology we built for that. But today, all of our customers, every customer we have contributes to the models. So everybody's feeding their data in. We get it as real time as we can get it, so that the AI can learn from up to the date, up to the minute data, right? So we're feeding in all the load characteristics that they can send us. We can take up to 37. Not everybody can feed us 37, but if we can get 37, that's great, because kind of what I just mentioned, the idea is that it's not all loads are created equal. There's different loads that have different requirements. And so you need to understand what those requirements are. And that's what's going to model what that rate is from Chicago to Denver instead of the next load. And so all of our customers feed that data in. It is then cleansed, as we talked about, and filtered through the models. And we actually produce 2 rates. So we produce a network rate, which is what is really just a generalized model. So every one of our customers logs into Greenscreens, they see that they're going to see the same rate. That's a generalized, filtered, clean model that the AI is predicting a rate at the moment that it's asked for that lane, based on all of that data, all those characteristics. We also bring in market data, I should add, around like capacity, fuel, different things like that also plays into it, not just what people paid and what those loads were. And so that's the network rate. And then we also build a target by rate for each customer. And this is kind of what I was talking about understanding your own rates and understanding your own freight and your own characteristics. The target rate is individualized for each customer. So each broker, we build a model that is their model, and it uses everybody's data, right? So you think about making comparisons between their data and this customer's data and that customer's data. When the AI does this, we don't share any of the data, but the AI is learning from all of it and then comparing and making similarities so that it can then produce an accurate rate, or as close to accurate as possible. And so that target rate, 10 of our customers can go in and run Chicago to Denver, different rate.
Sure.
So they have different freight and characteristics. So I think that is something that is, we kind of preach that in a big way. It's all the different variables that go. We probably look on every load about 100 different variables in general, right? With all the market stuff, that's important because that's how the market moves and that's how it works, right?
No, that's great. I appreciate that detail. I don't think I've ever had that description given to me, especially 37. Someday I'll ask why 37, but I want to move on.
You could probably guess. You probably know. You have a background in freight. You know what they are. I mean,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Oh, I'm sure
what
if
are all
I
the things you put in your TMS?
Yeah, I'm sure if I started writing down, I'd come up with 37. So
you could.
All right. So we got a few minutes left. 2 questions. First one, well, technically 3 questions. How do you think 2023 went? We're wrapping up 2023 right now.
You're gonna put me on the spot. Not good for anyone. Yeah, I mean, so the rates themselves, right? Dawn actually talked about this at the broker carrier. So with our rate data, so right now we represent about 20 plus billion, probably 21 or 22 billion dollars worth of broker to carrier data. That is this, annually. That's like real time that we're bringing in, and then predicting off of when on the network rate. When we looked at like medium hauls and average length of haul of like 700 miles across the peak to trough from like February of 22 to I think it was like May maybe of 23. I think it was like May of 23. When we hit the bottom, it was like 60% drop in rates. And so without, I mean, yes, volumes were a little sporadic or chaotic, I guess I should say, but volumes didn't like decrease massively, right? They were pretty flat.
Right. Yeah.
Or decreased slightly or flat. And so you were just moving the same amount of freight for less money this year. I mean, that's basically what it was, right? And that was painful for a lot of people. If you didn't put money away for a rainy day, this year was pretty rough. Because you were either on both the carriers and the brokers, you were either trying to dump customers because it wasn't profitable business, right? Or you were trying to maintain customers and hopefully keep the cash flow going to get through this. But then we've been flat through the end of the year. Right. So it's just been a continual, okay, let's tread water. And that's, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. That could be another podcast, right? As to why that all happened, the government surplus in the money that was out in the market, and the prices increasing and the inflation after COVID and everything else. I think silver lining to how bad, how poorly in 2023 has gone, and I mean you can see its evidence too in Yellow and Convoy and a lot of the other things that have happened, right? There's a lot, just as many Yellows and Convoys though. There's way many more small carriers and small brokers in our business. It was a sad year, right? You and I both know people who have had brokerages and carriers for a while that are struggling or have gone out of business. I think the positive thing is, as that occurs, I think we're going to see capacity tighten up, which should drive rates up. I don't know how quickly that's going to happen, because I think this is personally, and all the data we have and what we've been looking at, the discussions I've had with a lot of different executives and people we work with, I think it's going to take a few months. I think you're probably looking at Q2 before we see any marginal, increases, not back to a quote unquote normal level, whatever that is now. But I think you'll see rates come back up a little bit, which will help kind of stave off a little bit of that cash flow issue that people have. But I don't think until the back half of 24 we start to get to more normal levels, and that's barring no other economic issues, right? That we might have. It's an election year. There's a lot of debt right now. People are accumulating, so there's a lot of other straws that can break the camel's back. But I think, but I think the freight rates, as you see that capacity exit the market, our market should stabilize, I think, a little bit, at least in the back half of Q2, and then it will really be it'll be the back half of next year before we see anything significant at all. So.
Well, on a positive note, I don't typically hear too many people say it's going to get worse.
Well, that's so ironic. I know it feels so like defeatist to talk that way, but it's just it's economics right now. I think we had too many carriers enter the market in that last 3 years, and brokers too, right? Which also creates capacity in a way. So it's just kind of a reset, which is rough, but yeah,
I agree. I mean, you look at some of these truck areas where they're kind of holding areas throughout the country, where you see typically they're leasing facilities and whatnot, and they're like a Ritchie Brothers auction and that type of thing, and they might have 20, 30 trucks sitting there, and man, their parking lots right now, they're just full. They're stuffed full of trucks. And that's unfortunately, you don't want to see that happen, but that does need to happen to reset where we need to go to get the rates to a spot where they need to be. So I agree with you there. All right. Well, with that, I think we are at our time here, and I certainly appreciate you coming on and chatting. We'd love to have you back on another time. An hour goes by really fast.
It does. It always does. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Nate. I appreciate having me on. I'm excited to see you in a couple months. We'll be back on the trail.
Back on the trail. February is going to show up real fast. We'll have to see where you guys are staying and all that stuff, and get caught up here in a couple weeks and see how that goes. But certainly appreciate your time, and looking forward to catching up. Happy holidays to you, and take care.
Happy holidays to you as well, Nate. I appreciate it, man. You can connect with us too if you want. Greenscreens, it's right on the screen. It's the easiest thing if I put it on the screen.
Greenscreens.ai.
That's our website. If you go there, you can request a demo if you want a demo, or I'm always open. You know me on LinkedIn. Nate and I are always going back and forth on there too. So you can always reach out to me there. I'm always willing to connect with people, especially right now. I keep saying, like, if people are looking for jobs or different things with all the stuff that's been going on, I've been trying to connect different people in my network. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah, perfect. Greenscreens.ai. Appreciate the time, Kevin, and we'll catch you later. Thanks for tuning into the podcast, everyone. Stay curious, stay informed, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Until next time, drive forward with purpose and innovation.